Hello, beloved friends, and welcome to another weekly moment. I'm James Henry, and I will be sharing some thoughts with you. The first thought I always like to share is you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Be mindful of that. Keep that in mind. You're already precious. You're already loved. You're already a gift. It's not something you're striving for. It's not something that passed you by somewhere in the past. In this moment, you're precious. You are loved. You are a gift. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the way we see the world. I talk about that a lot, I know. But I wanted to ask the question, both to you and to me, how are you updating the way you see the world? One of the wonderful things about technology today is it allows us to choose to only be exposed to things we want to hear. Oftentimes, only things that completely agree with the way we see the world. Some people call that siloing, like being in a silo. You don't see the big picture, you're just up and down in that same silo. And you get reinforced in the way that you see the world. I wonder what you're doing to stretch yourself out of that. What are you reading? What are you practicing? I encourage you, and I encourage myself to read outside of what might normally be your reading range. For instance, this is from my past, but it is something that has really opened my eyes in some ways. For a long time, my spiritual practice included reading the Bible. I think that's a good book. I enjoy it. I even read what I would consider to be an expanded version of the Bible that's not that oftentimes we Protestants don't read, that include the Apocrypha, the intertestamental books between the Hebrew Bible and the writing of the Christian Bible, the intertestamental books that didn't make it into the canon, particularly in the Protestant church. I read all of that. But somewhere back about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to read more broadly from other traditions as well. And so I picked up a copy of the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist. It's not really a scripture, but the writings of Lao Tzu. And I found in it some deep truth that actually expanded the way that I was able to receive my own Christian tradition. The same is true of reading the Dhammapada from the Hindu-Buddhist tradition. The teachings there expanded my way of seeing. Some of them I could almost see as direct restatements or differing ways of stating what Jesus taught. And it allowed me to see some of what Jesus taught from maybe in a broader way. Now, I may have already lost some of you, may think, oh my gosh, why would you ever read anything other than the Bible? Because I want to see the world and update my way of seeing. I want to be sure that I'm seeing it as fully as God would want me to see it. And I keep discovering that the world is bigger and that God is bigger than the box I had neatly put God in. So I read from different traditions. I'm not looking to convert to another tradition. I love my Christian lineage and all that it has taught me and shown me, and I find a lot of good things in that tradition. I read the Christian mystics. I read the desert fathers and mothers. Um, I read all of those kinds of things because they expand my way of seeing. And I think for us, we are not meant to be static beings caught in a moment in time, but rather to constantly be growing in this world, in the way that we see the world, in the number of people we learn to accept and love. We're called upon to love our neighbors as ourselves and to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I feel like that's a good thing. So that's one way of updating the way we view the world, is to read more broadly. Now, if you haven't read deeply in the Christian tradition, I encourage you, before you start reading widely, maybe you should read more narrowly, which is to say, spend some time. If you come from the Christian tradition, spend some time with the Christian Bible. Start with, the founder of Christianity, the stories told about Jesus by the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Start there. Read those. Recognize what Jesus tried to teach, and listen carefully between the lines and see what he actually physically practiced. How did he live? What did he do? Those are things worth noting. Read more deeply in your Christian tradition, and then, perhaps read the letters of Paul and others that make up the rest of the Christian Bible. Read the history of the church, its beginnings in Acts. Now, Acts is a second volume of a 2-volume set by Luke, so you could always read the Gospel of Luke followed by the book of Acts. I don't know, but read more deeply and then more broadly. The other thing that you can do too is to practice. Practice, and these update your views too. Some practices include practices of mercy and justice. So volunteer at a soup kitchen. Volunteer to work in your local food pantry. Volunteer to help a person who can't get for themselves their groceries, pick those up for them and deliver them. Spend time with people who are different than you. That's a way to practice mercy. Stand up for your neighbors that you see being treated without justice. Those are some ways also to update your views, because as you act to change other people's worlds and engage with other people, not to other people, but with other people, oftentimes you find yourself changed. One of the biggest changes I've ever experienced was my years of volunteering with Appalachia Service Project. You can find them online at asphome.org, and you can find out about volunteering. There are year-round opportunities for adults and oftentimes more youthy volunteer possibilities during the summertime. But you can But when you volunteer in those places, you meet families, you meet others from different perspectives, other volunteers from across the United States. And if you're not in the United States, you're somewhere else, find a way in your local community that you might engage, because that's another way to update and expand the way you see the world. Because but instead of labeling people from certain locations or certain socioeconomic backgrounds in a certain way, which is what we tend to do, label, and then we can paint with broad strokes the pictures of folks without ever knowing any of them. If we actually engage in those practices, another way to update our way of seeing the world might be to begin practicing centering prayer or some form of meditation. So it's important that we not get stuck in the rut of believing uh, or of focusing or of being the same person perhaps that we were in third grade. That was a good age when you were a third grader. Now that we're adults, it doesn't hurt to update, expand, to read broadly, to understand the world around us in bigger ways. Because in so doing, we can see God in new ways, in new places, places we never imagined God hung out. Uh, Oftentimes beyond the stained glass windows of our churches, out and all over the world. So that's a thought for today. Work on updating your way of seeing the world. But whatever you do, remember you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. I hope you have a great week. I hope you stretch yourself with your reading and your practice. But no matter what, whenever you are watching this, you are precious and loved. A gift. Until the